We're at the Oldfields Estate at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, and joining me is Mark Zalanis, Deputy Director of Environment and Historical Preservation. Well, thank you so much for having us here today.
Well, you're very welcome. It's great to have you here.
This is a magnificent property. Give me a little background here.
Sure. Well, it's an unusual relic of the country place era, which started back in the 1890s with the building of Biltmore and finished off with about the onset of World War II. So we were smack in the middle of it back in 1912 when the Landon family, Hugh Landon and his wife, built this estate here along the banks of the White River. And later on it was purchased by Josiah K. Lilly Jr., who moved here with his family in the early 1930s. And it's just a wonderful 26-acre estate that is here for people to enjoy.
And Lilly, he had traveled up into New England and really enjoyed some of the landscapes he saw there and wanted to bring it back.
Right, right. His wife had enjoyed a garden that she saw at that time and said, I'd like to have one like that out here in Indianapolis. So they brought out the designer, Percival Gallagher from the Olmsted firm, to come out here and design this garden, the Ravine Garden, in 1921.
Okay, tell me a little bit about the Ravine Garden here.
Sure, it's about 1 acre in size, but it's very, very heavily planted in a sort of a semi-naturalistic style with these curving pathways that we're walking up on right now.
Very typical of the Olmsted
Oh, sure,
style.
yeah, very much of that style, but with a, you might be able to hear in the background here a stream that runs through the property. Originally just sort of a drainage ditch, but we've been able to recirculate that water through. But we concentrate on some water-loving plants along its edges so that the cardinal flower that's in bloom right now, and in the springtime there's some showy lady slippers and other plants that really thrive with their feet wet and take advantage of that siting.
Now there's a lot of evergreen plantings as well, and you mentioned a lot of the well-to-do families would go up north during the winter.
They'd go to Michigan, they'd go to New England, places such as that. They'd see things like evergreens, which are not heavily planted here, and they would have their gardeners and their landscape architects bring them back to a spot such as this so they can enjoy them as well. So we're blessed with a wide variety of plants. There's some 19,000 plants in this one garden that we reintroduced when we restored this garden back in 1998.
Excellent. Well, when Gallagher was here designing this wonderful Ravine Garden, the family also engaged him into doing some other renovations.
Right, right. They were very smart people and saw what talent he had to do this garden and said, why don't you do the rest of the 26-acre property? So a lot of the other features, the grand alley that leads out from the front of the house, replaced just a bunch of old fields of wheat that were there. He realigned the driveways to make them much more attractive and actually set the driveway down several feet into the landscape. So when you look out that grand alley, that driveway disappears. It's like a small ha-ha like you'd see in some of the estates in Europe where those drives disappear.
That whole front entry really reminds me of the grand estates in Europe.
Right, and on either side of that alley are curving pathways where you can get up close and personal with a lot of the unusual plant material, the perennials and annuals and bulbs that make it such a lush landscape for they as owners of the property and their guests, but now our guests to the museum get a chance to learn from what was planted many, many years ago.
It's nice to have those little intimate spaces when you have a lot of the properties very grand.
That's right, that's right. It's a nice combination.
Now another area that was renovated at that time was their formal garden.
Right, right, and it had been a formal garden from about, the early days of the estate, 1912, 1913. But when Mr. Gallagher came out, he added more plant material there, added arbors, which there was not there before, put in a new sculptural element. So it was really a much more enriched garden than it had been before. And it turned out to be just absolutely beautiful. And about 20 years ago, we had a chance to rehabilitate that garden for modern day visitors. So we changed the fabric of the pathways to make them more amenable to many more visitors coming through.
And what about the plant materials? You try to stay within a certain plant palette?
As much as we can. Being a historic estate of that country place era, we try where we can to stay with the plant material. And luckily for this Ravine Garden that we're standing in now, we had the exact plans from the Olmsted firm to go by. Their planting list, diagrams, even photographs of those plants going in. So we were able to replicate this almost exactly, even finding some of the old cultivars of tulip bulbs at the Dutch Bulb Museum in Holland and brought those here. So we really have some real treasures out here that you wouldn't see elsewhere.
Had some interesting plant hunting, I'm
Oh, sure. Oh, it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And now with the web being available to us, we could find a lot of those things which we couldn't do otherwise.
And one last little piece of this historic landscape that you've renovated is the Four Seasons Garden.
The Four Seasons Garden, just this past year, we finished up a complete restoration of that garden. And that was not done by the Olmsted Brothers, but later on by a woman landscape architect, Ann Bruce Haldeman of Kentucky, who the family engaged to design this very simple garden, but very lovely garden with a limited plant palette, formal in some ways, but it acts as a nice backdrop for I'm sure there are small parties and things, but today it's very much in demand for our social weddings and other functions. People are looking to have their small reception, perhaps a wedding, pre-wedding party or dinner out there as well. So it's a very, very handsome spot. Again, a wonderful contribution made that possible also.
Excellent. Well, this is just a remarkable landscape. You've done such great work preserving it and renovating it. It's wonderful that we could preserve this little piece of history.
Right. We're very fortunate. We have a lot of generous people here in the Indianapolis area who are making that restoration possible, and couldn't happen otherwise.
Thank you, Mark.
You're very welcome.